Welcome to the Truth and Liberty broadcast. We believe we have a mandate to bring godly change to our nation and the world through the 7 spheres or mountains of influence. To further this cause, we give away a product every week that will empower you to get involved in changing your life and changing our world. You can register for our weekly giveaway by subscribing at truthandliberty.net. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to receive weekly updates on guests, news, and much more. This is an interactive live cast, and we welcome your questions. To ask a question during the live cast, use the comment or chat features. Now get ready to dive into this week's topics with our hosts on location in Colorado, USA.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Truth and Liberty livecast. It's going to be a great night tonight. We're so glad that you're joining us, and I am really excited tonight because Karen Conrad's with us. And Karen and I are super honored tonight to have as our special guest Brother Mark Gonzalez, all the way from Texas, the great state of Texas. Came up here to teach in the Practical Government School and hold some pastor meetings, and he's stopping by through all this to be our guest tonight on the Truth and Liberty livecast. And I know you guys are going to be blessed to hear from Mark because he is, I tell you, he's one productive individual. It's going to be awesome. But before we give him a proper introduction, I want to ask Karen to jump in here, and she's got some announcements and other helpful information for everybody. Karen, you want to jump in here?
Yes. Welcome, everybody, to Truth and Liberty. We're so glad to have you with us tonight. And we want to just encourage you, if you are watching us on truthandliberty.net, we've got so much information that's available for you. And if you're watching us on social media, that is awesome. But for your best experience, we want to invite you to watch us on truthandliberty.net, just to make sure that something doesn't get disrupted, or sometimes we get a little censored on Facebook. So again, join us on truthandliberty.net. Richard, it looks like there's so many new updates happening on the website. There's valuable resources. You have a news feed. It's sort of like a one-stop shop for you to find out everything that's going on in the news, but it's got that nice biblical perspective, which we really appreciate. And Richard, thank you. I know that you go through and handpick all those things, and you really have great oversight over everything that is offered. Also, there's some updates coming up here. We've got the iVoter Guide. It's hard to believe, but we are right in the thick of the presidential primary election again. And just to find out about the platforms, who's running in the states, this is a great guide, and it's available on the website. Also, the White House summary of the new executive order that is protecting religious freedom. We're so appreciative of everything that President Trump has been doing to protect our religious freedom. Also, I'll just note one more thing. There's a parent resource guide responding to the transgender issue that's coming out from the Family Policy Alliance. You know, who would have thought that we would be dealing with something like this, but we need to know how to navigate through that as parents and grandparents. All of that is available on truthandliberty.net. Also, there's so much going on at Andrew Wommack Ministries. It amazes me the things that Andrew is doing at Andrew Wommack Ministries in Charis Bible College, and the things that are coming up next. We've got the Men's Advance from March 12th to the 14th, and Andrew is welcoming James Brown and Tony Dungy. You do not want to miss this. It really fills up quickly. It looks like there's a few seats left for you to attend, so go to awmi.net and go to events. Also, the Army Conference is coming up on March 23rd. We've got Andrew Wommack, Pastor Duane Sheriff, Billy Epperhart, and Dr. Barry Burns. So if you are a minister, a licensed minister, you are qualified to go to that conference. And God With Us is April 3rd through the 5th. I'll tell you, this is an amazing musical that is a perfect thing to bring friends and relatives to during the Easter season, just to show them the grace of God in a very fun and really Broadway style, Broadway quality with Elizabeth and Robert Mirren. And we've got CBC Campus Days that are coming up. That's April 15th through the 17th. This is a great chance if you're thinking about going to Charis Bible College. First of all, I encourage you to go to Charis Bible College. But if you want to check it out and learn a little bit more, this is a wonderful opportunity. And Charis Bible College is now accredited. And so that's really been a blessing for people. Also, every week on Truth and Liberty, one of the special things we do is we like to have interaction with you. We want to take questions and You'll be able to ask those questions. If you are on social media, go ahead and enter those questions in the comment section. Got a whole team standing by that's able to grab those, and they pull them over onto my iPad here. Also, if you're on truthandliberty.net or awmi.net, go ahead and put your question in the chat section of those, and they will send those forward. And we'll answer as many of those as we can. Also, we have a giveaway every week. And last week, our winner was Julia Hopper, and she won Change to Chains by William Federer. And if you missed that broadcast, go to truthandliberty.net and you can catch up on all the archives. But Julia, congratulations. That's going to be a great prize for you. And this week we are giving away Andrew's How to Follow God's Will. And Richard, you probably have that right there.
I do, right here, yeah.
And you know what's so great about that? That's one of the most common questions that we receive is how to hear God's voice and how to know that we are doing what God's called us to do. So that teaching is fabulous. And if you want to be eligible to win, if you're already subscribed to Truth and Liberty, you're eligible. If you want to go ahead and subscribe and be eligible for this, go to truthandliberty.net. Click on subscribe and we'll get you in that drawing for these prizes. Also, Truth and Liberty is a donor-supported program, and we just want to encourage you and invite you to sow seed into this program. We're a 501c4, so it's not tax deductible, but I assure you in the kingdom of God, sowing and reaping is there, whether it's tax deductible or not, and it really gives us the freedom to talk about political issues or things that maybe under a 501c3 we wouldn't be able to do. So to give, go to truthandliberty.net and click on donate, or you can call 719-635-1111. And if you are watching and you've got questions about the ministry or you need prayer, we have prayer ministers standing by that would love to pray with you tonight. And you can call that same phone number for prayer at 719-635-1111. And so, Richard, we are so excited about our guest, Pastor Mark, tonight.
That's right. Well, thank you, Karen. Wow, that was awesome. A lot of great information there. And I want to encourage everybody who's watching tonight. You know, a lot of people will sit back and they'll complain and yell at the TV. You know, they see these news things going on. One way, if you want to make a difference and you want to go from just being a complainer to being someone who's actually making a difference, is you can support Truth and Liberty. And especially with a recurring donation, you can become a member of our coalition by signing up on our website where it says Become a Member. So we want to thank you all for your generosity on that. And it is my honor to introduce to our audience tonight Pastor Mark Gonzalez. And Mark is the founder and the executive director of the Hispanic Action Network. And Mark has been called on by everybody from presidents to party chairmen and candidates all across the nation to mobilize voters and mobilize more specifically Christians to get out of the pew and to get into the public square to make a difference. And his resume here goes on and on. I can't even begin to tell you. He's been, like I said, in the White House. He's testified in front of Congress. He's managed campaigns. He has led the Black Robe Regiment, the modern day Black Robe Regiment, and so many other things, has activated the largest Hispanic grassroots network in the nation. And I'm thankful that that is a conservative organization standing up for biblical values. Mark, It's so good to have you with us tonight.
No, thank you, Rich. It's an honor to be here. I'm glad that there's organizations and programs like this and Truth and Liberty Coalition and so forth that is willing to talk these topics and engage the church, because it's so vital and it's so important, so needed. I always tell people the church is the answer. If the church doesn't get it, you know, America is not going to be saved. And so at the end of the day, that's what this is about. It's about building up a church movement that's going to bring the solution, even in government, to our nation.
Yeah. You know, a lot of people, I'm sure you've heard this before, but a lot of people say, oh, the church doesn't have any business in politics, or I believe in separation of church and state. How do you respond to those folks?
Yeah, well, first, biblically, there is no separation. The Bible is very clear that the government rests on his shoulders. He's established it. And from that standpoint, I tell folks, he ordained government, he's ordained the church, and I'm to participate. So when people try to use that, I said, look, I get it. I don't even mix politics and religion. Because the point here is not about politics and religion, it's about church and government. And God has ordained both. And so the point here is to put it in the context biblically of how God sees it. So when God talks about the church, I'm to participate. When God talks about government, I'm to participate because he established both. And he goes even further in Romans 13 and even calls our elected officials, they're serving in office, and those in government, ministers of God for good. So, I mean, just like a minister, just like the fivefold ministry, that's what government is. That's what elected officials are. And so we are to look at it that way. And so I'm excited because we're going to get to be able to teach all this week on some of these nuts and bolts that people don't get and don't see. Because I don't get to just go off crazy. Yeah. Okay, as the church, as a minister of the gospel, as a believer, because I got biblical principles in the Bible that I have to follow. Okay, and so from one of those is to honor those that are in elected office, to honor those. Now, it doesn't mean I can't protest. It doesn't mean I can't, because I've protested. I've done all that before, okay? But I told them, if you don't do this, this is what we're going to do because we're the church and we got to do this. So the point is about the honor. We as we honor and we move forward, realizing that we have a voice, we need to participate, we can make a difference, and we need to make a difference. We're losing the culture, and that's why we're here, because we have to take it back. And the only one that can do that right now, that's been anointed by God to transform society, it's not the government, it's not a party, it's not a candidate, it's the Church of Jesus Christ. And that's where we come in, and we have to engage like never before, because that's where we're lacking. 75% of the church right now doesn't vote. And so when you see these numbers, then we wonder why the commandments are on the wall, why abortion is legal, same-sex marriage is taking over the day. We see, no parent school commandments aren't, all these things. Why? Because the standard bearers are not participating. Yeah, we carry that standard of biblical principles out of the Bible, but us that have that aren't doing it and aren't participating, so we've created a vacuum. Somebody else is filling it, and it's not biblical worldview. So when we do that, then you have individuals that don't fear God, that don't care about the church, don't care about Jesus, don't care about the kingdom of God. And so that's the kind of legislation that gets passed. Yeah. So when then that happens, then we want to show up to the dance at the last minute. And there's been no courtship. There's not been any civic engagement. There's not been meeting with our elected officials. There hasn't been us going to the Capitol. Hasn't been with us going to city council. You're trying
to say it's about more than just voting. Yes. It's going to take more than just voting if we're going to turn the ship around.
Yes, it is.
And you've got an organization called Hispanic Action Network. What do you do through that organization?
Our whole deal is focusing on educating, equipping, and engaging the community of faith from a biblical worldview. Okay, and I say that very carefully because there's more than just evangelicals that are pro-life. Okay, there's more than evangelicals that are pro-traditional biblical marriage, right? So for us is if you believe in biblical marriage, if you believe on life from conception and so forth, okay, when it comes to the vote, all right, we're going to need to harness our power together and go out to the polls and make a difference and get folks in office that are pro-life, that are biblical marriage. And so we challenge those groups beyond even just the evangelical community. Now, that's where I come from, right? I've been born and raised in ministry all my life. Yeah. So that's all I've ever known is ministry. My father was a teen evangelist for 14 years. He pastored for 14 years, went home to be with the Lord in 1996, and then we launched our own ministry. And so then we were pastoring and so forth. And for us, it was, how do I impact my city? And before I knew it, we were on the Education Foundation. We're on the board of the Chamber of Commerce. I helped the mayor get elected. My secretary, I was also the president of the Minister Alliance, says, God's telling me to run for office. What do? I said, well, you run for office. And he goes, good, because I want you to be my campaign manager. Okay. I said, no, he told you to run for office, not me. And but finally, after being persistent, we helped him, and he won by 7 votes. Wow. And then he won by 200, then 600. Now he's mayor of the city, right? So these are the things that can happen, but it took the church engaging. Because I tell folks, the world is not going to do our job. The world is not going to put people that fear God and have a biblical worldview that are pro-life, pro-biblical values, pro-Israel, pro-life judges at the Supreme Court, all these things that we believe in, not allowing men and women's bathrooms, and all these things that are happening. And so it's the church that needs to do that. And if we don't show up, then we can't complain. Yeah. Okay, we need to engage, and we have a strategy that we want to implement and we want to share with the pastors and leaders here in Colorado, which we'll be doing over this coming week, as well as training millennials. As we know, they're now the largest voting bloc in America. Yeah. Okay, but this is not...
And 60-something%, according to some surveys, believe socialism is a good thing, of millennials.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And that you found a good poll. Some it's even higher. Okay. So the point was that all these things that are happening, the good thing in that regard, because of how they believe in socialism and some of these things, where you get the Green New Deal and all, because they sound good. So yeah, we got to do that. We got to save the planet. We got to, not realizing what it really takes to do that, and what's the connotations of that, and the unintended consequences, and so forth and so on. Only 12% of millennials are actually voting. So we have a little window here to continue to educate them. That's why when we got the opportunity to come here to Charis to be able to share and with that next generation of leader, we say we have to. I've been in meetings where we meet with millennials and they're like, we don't care about that, and we don't care about this, we care about the environment. And these were Christian young people. Yeah. And I'm like, God, you need to help us. What do we got to do? And so we're strategizing just how do we reach the millennial generation, because if they were to get harnessed and taken and moved, and they get moved to the polls by someone, some part, whatever, that is a major block that can really make a difference. So we want them to vote biblically more than anything.
Well, Pastor Mark, before we go too much further, I want everybody to know how they can connect with you and support what you're doing. So how would folks do that?
Yes, well, they can go to our website, HispanicActionNetwork.com. Also, we're on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all the normal things that everybody else does as well. You can send us an email at info@HispanicActionNetwork.com, and we'll respond, if you have questions or so forth. Everything is right there on our website, so you can kind of connect with us there and follow us, sign up for our newsletters so you know where we're at across, the country, as we'll be in 20 states in 2020. We're looking at 125,000 churches across over 20 million voter guides. So it's going to be a major, push that we're looking at doing in 2020 again, because it's about, saving the country. Yeah. We refuse to let America go by the wayside and get lost. I truly believe that we can take back the culture. Yeah. And I believe the greatest days for America are still ahead of her, but it's going to take the church to do that, which is why we are so tunnel visioned in working with the church to make sure that we can begin to engage the pew and turn it out to the polls and vote biblical values. And I believe that'll happen because, as we educate the church and we educate pastors, but we fail to realize the correlation of how connected our vote is to revival. All right, and people don't get that. We go into the prayer closet and we're praying for revival, and we fast and we seek God, and we're not realizing that your vote is. I tell it this way, and you can take it with the grain of salt, however you want to. But I say, revival's not coming from the prayer closet. Revival's coming through the ballot box. Okay, and this is because here's the thing. When God showed up in the land, and if we going back to the Bible to structure, again, we just want to stay biblically here, is God was showing up in the land when the highest office of the land was a God-fearing individual. When there was a God-fearing king, you were seeing what God was doing in the earth realm, right? They were in peace, they were in harmony, they were in abundance, they were in supply. God was moving and so forth. But there was an evil king, okay, that didn't fear God, that didn't care about God and so forth, a bad king, all right? They were in famine and judgment and war and plunder and all these things. What was the difference? The fear of the Lord. Yeah. Right? So these are the things that we're looking for. So I get it. I get what people are saying, no, God's got it. I say, well, first of all, God don't have it because God don't vote, okay? All right? Because in our society, they don't get appointed. In the Bible, they got appointed. In our world, they get elected.
Yeah.
Okay, so the whole point is the highest office of the land, for it to be a God-fearing individual, it's going to take a church to put that God-fearing individual in that place of authority.
Yeah, I like to say it like, God's got his part, but we've got our part.
Yes.
And we can spend all day praying, and I believe God is doing his part.
Yes.
The problem we've got is that we're not doing our part, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, I hear a lot of times, like here in Colorado, recent election cycle, there was some work to pass out voter guides, at churches. And there were a lot of big churches in Colorado that were saying, no, thank you. We don't want your voter guides. We don't get into politics. How do you handle that? How do you talk to pastors about politics? How do you change their mind and make them understand that they have a role to play?
A lot of times what we find out is a lot of the churches and pastors don't realize how critical, we're losing the culture right now. Mm-hmm. So that's part of what we try to do. We try to awaken them to what's going on. So you'll get to see part of that on when we do this presentation to pastors here in Colorado, because when they see the culture battles that are going on out there and that we're losing them and the consequence and what's happening, okay, the pastor says, I got to do something. Mm-hmm. And so part of that strategy is then take them from that moment of they're ready to respond to say, okay, give us an individual that we can train in your church to mobilize and establish a civic ministry in the church. Because here's the thing, our whole thing is 100% voter registration, 100% voter turnout, and you're going to get a biblical value voter guide come election time, so you know where the candidates stand on the issues. Because again, at the end of the day, we're not going to vote party, we're going to vote Bible. Okay, and so if we're going to vote Bible, we're going to let you know where these individuals stand. But that comes when you've already oriented a pastor. And when they begin to realize, because people don't know, for instance, what's going on with our kids, the sex education, that's happening right now. Okay, maybe in Colorado, some of y'all are being awakened to this because you're seeing it almost on a daily basis, and this battle's ongoing already for a year now and so forth. Mm-hmm. But in most places, it's creeping in, and because they learn from states like Colorado, they learn from states like California, and they start going more underground and passing things at the school board meeting, and they're doing it overnight. Next thing you wake up, and you have a new sex education curriculum in your school.
That's right.
And all these are the things that are going on, right? I said, but when they see, we kind of hear it because we all had to go to sex ed. All right, but it's not the same sex ed that it today that it was back in that day.
Right.
Okay, so if you just correlate it that way, but when you show what they're being taught, I teach an actual fifth grade sex ed curriculum. We show the pastors this is what they're teaching our kids. Okay, and when they begin to see that, they're like, no way. And when then you begin to show, the things of what's happening out there and what's happening to our kids, especially because they're the ones paying the price. The Coons cheerleaders that were putting scriptures on the banners as a football team was coming onto the field. If it's student led, it's legal, right? But they got taken to court.
Yeah.
All right, and had to assume in a 4-year court battle and so forth. Praise God, we won. But the thing is, this is what happened. We saw what happened to the teenager. To the pinnacle of high school sports is what? To get to state. Well, the last leg of the 440 relay was a young Christian kid. He crosses the finish line in first place, and because he's grateful to God, all he did was raise his finger. And because he raised his finger, they got disqualified. Right? We see what judges are telling schools and valedictorians. You can't mention God, Jesus, or your faith in your speech. Yeah. And in this one in the Santa Fe Independent School District, they literally said, and to make sure, I'm going to put a marshal inside the graduation. And if you do, I'm going to put you in jail, and you're going to wish you had never been born.
Well, that's ungodly.
I'm like, okay. But I tell people, what do we do as pastors? What do we do as parents, as leaders? Yeah. Okay, we tell our kids, don't be ashamed of the gospel. Be bold for Christ. Take a stand for Jesus. So why?
Yeah.
When we won't do it from our pulpits.
Yeah.
When we won't take a stand from our platforms. Yeah. Okay, why should they take a stand? Why? So they can get sued, so they can get disqualified and get put in jail, and we won't talk about it?
Right.
So these are the things that as we share what's really going on out there, and pastors begin to awaken to, they say, you know what? Yeah, you're right. We need to do something. And then people begin to engage. And the point is, we just do it at a massive level. We're not talking reaching 100, 500. We're reaching thousands of pastors and churches and engaging. So we're okay if, not that I'm okay, but if, a handful or so are saying we don't want the voter guide, I'm saying it's okay. We're going to replace you over here on the other side because no is not an option. We have to engage to make sure that we're participating and we're seeing it. I mean, we just come from a state where we turned out to vote the greatest conservative turnout, and we mobilized 2,100 churches in New Mexico.
In New Mexico.
Okay, and so the conservative vote
in 2018. Okay.
Yeah, and so now there was a blue wave. So there was still on the liberals agenda still won and passed and went forward with their elected officials and so forth. They got elected, but the turnout was greater than it had been. And so people weren't expecting that. So my point is this, it works. When the church engages, we can turn out the vote and we can win. But here's what happened. Because here's the real story of even New Mexico, because people try to reflect on that, because we had already said it's going to take 3 cycles, right? So we just went to 1 cycle, and this is what the great turnout that happened. But then we went to, they tried to pass legislation on abortion all the way, because they've already been killing babies outside the womb in New Mexico for 10 years. We heard it about New York and Virginia, but they've been doing it for 10 years. Okay, so they've been doing it for way longer. They just highlighted it over here on the other side of the country. But the point is with liberals in charge of the state, we killed the abortion bill and we killed physician-assisted suicide.
Yeah.
Okay, because they realized the church is waking up, and we even had, Democratic elected officials that flipped and voted with the Republicans and the conservatives, and because that's what happens when the church engages, and we can begin to take back our states and begin to take back our cities, and that's what we're even most excited about in 2021, just as excited what's going to happen locally in our states.
Yeah. Well, Mark, I'm curious about something else about your ministry, and that's the Hispanic Vote. And, a lot of conservatives kind of write off minorities as sort of like, well, what are we going to do? They're voting Democrat. African Americans, maybe 90%, Hispanics, maybe 70% or whatever. What are you seeing out there amongst minority communities as far as their openness to conservative principles and maybe re-examining their allegiance to the Democratic Party?
Yes, well, first of all, talking about Hispanics Hispanics are conservative. They're considered, literally one of the most conservative people groups in America, okay? Because they're pro-God, pro-life, pro-work, pro-traditional marriage, pro-life, and so forth. And I had a 6th one that's pro-birth, which is needed if we want to continue to that replacement rate to keep a nation functioning and so forth, which is also important. And that nobody really talks about.
No, but that's a good point.
And so these are, and again, that's where it all meshes in with immigration and other things that are going on. But they're a conservative people group. The point is they're not being educated. See, because we've already proven the model across America that when you educate a Hispanic, 9 times out of 10, he's going to vote conservative because that's what he is. But when you don't educate him, he's going to vote tradition. And that's Democratic, right? Because that's what everybody's like, we see this whole thing of, Rush Limbaugh and all these are talk, and I listen to them and I think they're great and all. But when they say statements like, why do we want to fix immigration? We're going to legalize 15 million Democrats. I said, no, we're not. Okay? Because we need to educate them. If you're not educating them, okay, you can't expect them to vote any other kind of way. And we've seen it. All right. I've worked presidential campaigns for a very long time as well, from the presidential to the local level. We've run in hundreds of races all across the country. I go, when you educate them, they're going to vote because they are pro-life. They are pro-biblical marriage. They are these things. But when you don't tell them that, all right, then they're going to vote the way grandma, grandpa, aunt, and uncle, mom, and dad have been voting. But to peel off, you're going to have to educate them on the issues, which is why that voter guide has been so vital and so important. And we've been able to even peel them off, even with the issue of immigration still being out there, okay? Because the whole thing we talk about here, if we're going to be one-issue voters, it has to be life, not immigration, okay? And we're seeing that turning of the tide taking place because at the end of the day, we care about the family, and that's what it's about.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome.
If I could ask a question, Mark, that's really great. I think the iVoter Guide and things are really important tools for people that aren't maybe in a church, or people that were not able to reach the pastors. What is the best way that you would recommend that we educate the Hispanic community on these issues?
We utilize many fronts as well. You know, from the social media front, we're working right now with. There's a big conglomeration of conservative Christian individuals that are going. We're going to move heavy on social media platforms, educating. You know, we got all these movements that are happening out there that are taking place to educate Hispanics to be conservative, vote conservative, and so forth. Also, as we're having these meetings, we're having more and more. You know, there's always that crossover. You're going to get the party. You're going to get the activist guys going to show up to your meeting and all that kind of thing. That happens all over America. And we say, great. Now go talk to your church. Go talk to your pastor and say, I want to run the civic ministry in your church. Okay, because that, again, part of the strategy, we haven't gotten into it, but the thing is, the strategy is we want to establish a civic ministry in the church on the way to turning out the vote in 2020. Okay, because when we do that, we're going to create, I tell people, we're creating this civic interstate that doesn't exist right now in the church. Okay, the civic interstate of the church finally being organized. So how did 2% tell the other 98% how to do life and marriage and family and so forth? Is because they're organized and we're not.
That's right.
Okay, but if we're organized, we're 98%, man. We clean house. We decide what's going to be, how the day is going to go, how legislation and candidates and so forth, but we're not doing our part. So the goal here is to get organized, not just mobilized. There's a difference. Mobilizing means every time 2020 comes, we're doing it all over again, right? Phone calls, emails. I mean, we're going at it because we got to turn it all out. But if we get organized, and when I say organized, imagine you get 100 churches organized with a civic ministry. Let's just use Colorado Springs. We're here, right? Say we get 100 churches with a civic ministry in Colorado Springs. If we get 100 churches, there's going to be a couple of districts that are going to have a little cluster of 15, 20 to 25 churches in that district. When that happens, I know we can take over city council, we can take over at least 2 school board seats and some boards and commissions. See, but we can't do it if we don't organize. So then the following year, we're going to add to that 100. Okay, now we got 200 and 3. Actually, that's kind of slow. We're moving a lot faster across the country. So we're moving every month. We're adding to this. So the point here is we're getting to places where we have 500, 600, 700 ministries organized in particular cities, where now in 2021, when it comes to local elections, all right, we're going to start taking over some of those. We're going to decide who's going to run those seats and who's going to run those districts, because we're now organized for the first time. And I tell people, everybody has one. Everybody has a civic ministry. Because everybody has somebody in their church that's always reading the paper, always listening to the news, always listening to talk radio. And every time I tell a pastor that, everyone's shaking their head. I was like, okay, good. Because I want you to give us that person's name, because then we're going to come back and we're going to train them. And when we do that, we're seeing the momentum begin to build, because it's through that ministry now that we can get from 25% to 100%, okay, and turning out the vote.
Yeah. So this idea of a civic ministry in the church, now, it doesn't have to be a quote-unquote Hispanic church, right?
Oh, no.
So you're reaching out into all kinds of churches.
Every church. We want every church in America with a civic ministry. That's the whole point, okay? Because when we do that, now we start seeing the numbers that begin to take place, because it's a numbers game. I tell folks, look, if you're looking at society, you're looking at the media, you're looking at the paper, you're hearing the radio and all these things, this thing looks impossible, man. It's too far gone, right? But when you look at the numbers, and you say, oh, we got these numbers in this district, we can take this, right? So people don't realize, and that's where we come in, because we provide the numbers and we say, look, if we organize in this district, or we're organized in this region, in this city, in this state, we can take back this state. Okay, and when the churches begin to see that, especially the pastor says, oh, wow, yeah, we can do that. Okay, and then you start creating that momentum, man. It's just, it becomes that tsunami, becomes that snowball effect that people begin to engage and folks start coming forward, because it's going to take that. I tell folks, what does a church do when it needs to deal with something in the community, right? It needs to deal with children, starts a children's ministry. It needs to deal with the youth, starts a youth ministry. It needs to deal with the poor, starts a food ministry. I said, so if we want to get serious about taking our government back, okay, we're going to have to establish a civic ministry. Yeah. It's not going to happen no other way, okay, because that's the mechanism in place that God uses the church as the pillar of society, okay, to establish ministries to become the answer and the solution to bring salt and light into that dark area. So these are the things that we're, sharing with the pastors. So when you start bringing the different layers of the hope, what's going on out there, this is why we need to engage. Pastors are beginning to get this and say, okay, count me in, and here's John. Count me in, and here's Mary. Count me in, and here's Josephine. Count me, and then we're coming in and we're training these individuals, and we're launching these ministries all across America, and we're seeing the momentum that's being built. And in districts that you could say a conservative doesn't stand a chance, they're like, you know what? We might be able to actually win this district this go around.
Yeah, it's all about turnout, isn't it?
It's all about turnout.
All about numbers.
It's all about numbers, and there's nobody better to do it than Mary in the church that everybody knows, that gives everybody the news. But now you officially have this ministry that's been empowered by the pastor, blessed by the pastor, and now it can run just like every other ministry of the church. And I truly believe the day will come where that ministry will be the biggest ministry in the church because of what's going on in society.
So, we got people watching the show right now, and they're getting fired up and hearing this, and I want you to tell them again, how, if they want to get a civic ministry in their church, what should they do?
Yes, well, you can go to our website. You can sign up if you're interested in a civic ministry and you want to be a part of this and join and be part of the movement. Then we'll connect you to something going on in your area when we come into your state and so forth. And so when that happens, you can join and we can train. Or we're creating online courses, all the things that we're doing, because it is starting to create a little tsunami across this country as people wanting to engage and saying we've had enough with what's going on in our city and our community. And so from that particular standpoint, you can sign up and we'll follow up with you right after that.
And if you're watching tonight and you're in Colorado or even one of the neighboring states, so Mark's going to be at Church for All Nations tomorrow night at what, 7 o'clock?
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. So you can turn out there and hear him give a full presentation that will absolutely light your fire. It's lighting my fire right now, so that's awesome.
If I could just ask another question here, it's so interesting in Haggai, it talks about it took a remnant of people. And I think the liberal media has just gone, so far with things to make the liberal agenda look like there's so many people that are on the liberal agenda that it really kind of doesn't matter what we do. And it's almost like propaganda. And so, Pastor Mark, when I hear you talk about this, it's really exciting because you're stirring up a remnant of people in all these areas. And that is all it's going to take for us to be able to move this forward towards biblical values. So I just want to encourage everybody, look, it is not what the liberal media is propagating. Not at all, because when you look at the numbers, when you look at the base of the United States, an overwhelming majority consider themselves Christians. And so anyway, it's just encouraging, like we can do something about this and be active and change things. I want to ask you a question. In President Trump's State of the Union speech, he mentioned that unemployment among Hispanics is at an all-time low. Can you tell us how important is something like this, employment and the economic turnaround in our nation? How important is that in the Hispanic community?
Yeah, it's very important because, first of all, they're very pro-work, okay? They've got this work ethic that's off the charts. That's why they came to America, okay? They came to America for the American dream. And so from that standpoint, they came with that wiring, so to speak, DNA, to do that. They're very entrepreneurial. 75% of the new businesses in America are Hispanic-owned businesses. Oh my God! Right. So I mean, these numbers that are right now moving. It's just like it's crazy. Then the statistics just in the Hispanic community, which people don't realize, and which is why I truly believe the issue that's going on with immigration, and I'll get back to that point, Karen, is because Satan is trying to keep this nation divided, keeping the church divided, even on this issue, but to suppress a community that God is raising up in this hour right now. Okay? Because for instance, this is what people don't realize. We are, 82%, put it this, we're the most super social users in America. 76% of Hispanics are on social media compared to 69% of the rest of society. All right, we're the most mobile, 658 minutes versus everybody else. It's 500 minutes. Okay, so we're seeing that we're the number one consumers of smartphones right now. So in other words, anything that anybody's doing, if you don't have a strategy for Hispanics, man, because this is the future. All right, this is where this is going right now. And then for the election, there'll be 32 million eligible to vote this year come November. Wow. Okay, more than ever in history of America. So these are the things that we're seeing. 65,000 a month become eligible to vote in America. So the point is this, it's not even about I tell people the growth is happening is legal growth. Okay, that's what we got to be mindful of. And they're going to be voting based on how we're perceiving and talking and dealing and treating their mom, their dad, their grandma, their grandpa. And this is why it's so important that, especially the church, I get the pundits, I get the political folks, I get all that. If they want to go ahead and talk crazy, talk crazy. But we, the church, let's speak with a balanced message. Because God is up to something. Because here's the thing. I'm going to interject this. 32 million have migrated to America born again. All right, so they're coming from these Latin American countries, and I have PowerPoints. This is what I do. I've debated presidents and all this on these issues, and so this is what we do. Okay, so that have already come born again. So here's what I tell people: look, we've been praying for revival, and God is answering our prayer, except it's wrapped up in an issue called immigration. All right, because what's coming across the border is fire. Now, don't get me wrong, we got bad stuff coming over the border. That's why we support a wall. Okay, we support that there should be a wall. There's nothing wrong with the wall. What we want to know is what you're going to do beyond the wall, because the system is broken and it needs to be fixed. But there's nothing wrong with the wall, because we got opioids, drug cartels, drugs coming over. We got what they call OTMs, other than Mexicans, terrorists, and so we support the wall. We don't have issues with the wall. It's about fixing the rest of the broken system. Okay, but on the spiritual side, okay, God is bringing people over that are already saved, already born. I've already seen revival in other parts of the world that God is bringing back to America. So I'm just saying, let's calm down, let's get off the edges. Right, let's get here and let's focus, let's pray, because God has the answer.
Well, we got to get people in Congress who are willing to fix the system, don't we?
Yes.
Because there's been some efforts made, but the Democratic House wouldn't touch it. They wouldn't even take it up, Trump's immigration plan. So, I don't know where you go with that. Well, Mark, we could fill probably several hours with you.
Yes.
We've got about 15 minutes left here. And I'd like to give our viewers an opportunity to ask you some questions. So, Karen, are we getting any questions in tonight?
We sure are. There are a lot of great questions that are coming forth. And this one's a really interesting question. It's come from a guest. And it says, this is radio an effective means of communicating with the Hispanic community?
It's one of the most effective ways to communicate with a Hispanic community, okay? Because they'll be working, they got the radio blaring, they got, it's always been about radio when it comes to the Hispanic community, especially the Christian community, okay? Why is radio is so strong, and that's why churches still invest in that medium, because a lot of the Hispanic community is still listening to it quite a bit, still today. So it's a very effective means, and so I recommend make that part of your repertoire of whatever you're going to use. And the other thing is the number one way, okay, to reach a Hispanic is right here, the cell phone.
Cell phone.
Number one way is cell phone. The number one way, statistics, okay, that a Hispanic gets on the internet is through a cell phone. Okay, they may not have anything, but they're going to have this. And so from that standpoint, this is the number one way. So apps, text messaging. Things that involve the cell phone is what you want to make sure you're utilizing if you really want to move the Hispanic vote here in America, which is why we use all those there. We have a text messaging system, text messaging platform, all those kind of things that we use for folks to be able to take advantage of it.
Oh, that's great. And this is coming in from Judith from St. Louis on chat. And she asked, Pastor Mark, is there momentum on what you're talking about in California? And if so, what progress have you seen?
In California, we've worked with churches in the past. Again, when you come into a lot of these states that are so massive and the fight is going to be extensive and so forth, you have to find people that believe in that state that want to fund a movement to begin to move the church. And that's the part that we're praying for in California, because now there's been pockets, there's been organizations, groups, we've all come in, done a small thing here or there, but to really put in a ground game, a grassroots game where we're coming in to mobilize thousands of churches to the polls and establish, thousands of civic ministries, that doesn't exist right now in California. We hope that'll change soon. We've been praying for that to take place. We got close in 2018. We still haven't given up for 2020 because if you want to take back the House, okay, there are pockets in California that we're going to have to win. So we're hoping we can get into those pockets and mobilize the church. But overall, as a whole in California, it has not caught wind just yet. The biggest thing that we've been able to move on when it has been California has been immigration. And because, again, at the end of the day, it's still a big issue for the Hispanic community. It's, no pun intended, it is the elephant in the room, okay? And that's why I pray to God we can get sooner than later, get this thing out of the way so we can deal with all the rest of the issues that we win on night and, 24/7, 7 days a week. But because of that one, we always got to jump that hurdle. And so we got to educate the church to look beyond it. We've been successful to some extent to do that. But when that's out of the way because it's been dealt with, then you can just go right into the DNA of who we are. Yeah. Pro-life, pro-marriage, pro-work.
What's the sticking point on immigration? Is it what to do with Dreamers and DACA and all that sort of thing, or
the lowest hanging fruit is always DACA, and so the Dreamers, because again they were brought here for no fault of their own. It's like I tell people, look, when I decide to move and pack up and go somewhere, my kids don't get to tell me, no, Dad, I don't want to. Okay, it's just not going to happen. They got to do what Daddy says. All right, and so they got brought here, no fault. Yes, right now they're 30 years old or whatever the case may be, but when they came, they were under 12. Okay, that's what the law was. So these were kids that were brought over. And so to sit there and say, no, we're not going to do this. Okay, no, we're not going to find a way. That's where we lose on the messaging. Okay, and I say this very carefully, Richard, messaging. See, because I've been there since 2005. When we went in 2006, we're in the Bush White House, and we've been in this fight at the highest. We've worked with everyone under the sun to try to resolve this issue. Republicans nor Democrats, okay, are going to give you this issue because Democrats, they want to use it as a wedge issue. All right, Republicans, they just think they know, but they at times don't know. And we've been taking our cues from the wrong organizations. Okay, but that's a whole other message that we need to get into. Okay, but here's the deal. But for the DACA thing, I want to put it this way. As conservative as I am, and I tell people what we do and so forth, and people know what we represent, I say, look, DACA is biblical. In other words, we don't put the sins of the fathers upon the children. That's Bible. Okay, so for us to say, no, we're not even going to do nothing, I'm like, I can't go there. I'm sorry. I can't do that because biblically that's not a principle that I follow. Well, so I can't do it with them.
That's something to think about, isn't it?
Yeah.
We'll have to bring you back and let you go into that in more detail.
Great. Okay, we have another guest that asked this. How can we work with Hispanic communities in our areas and partner with them to affect godly change in the local governments?
Well, there's greater and greater movements that are happening right now. And so part of that is to kind of connect to some of the things that are doing and make those relationships with them. Because a lot of times What happens, I don't know who this individual is and what exactly they're trying to do, but as a whole, it's because we are talking about elections. Let me just stick to that piece right now. Parties and stuff like to come. They come in at the last minute, so it's pretty obvious. Okay, you're courting me because you want my vote, right? But the other, 18 months, I never saw you. So our point is okay, be genuine. Let's start to build those long-term relationships. And once those long-term relationships are built, then we can then affect each other for change and begin to really make an impact and a difference. Because at the end of the day, those that have come, especially from Latin American countries like Venezuela and Colombia and, and all these places, they've come to America, man. They know socialism doesn't work. They know you need to work. You need to be working hard. They believe in God. They believe in the family. So they have that DNA. I have elected officials tell me all the time, Mark, you guys are going to save America, man. You guys have the DNA that we need as a nation. Okay, but you guys don't vote. All right, you need to vote in that way. All right, so that's why we're training and we're working with the Hispanic community and the church at large, because the church ain't voting either. Okay, and so so with that, we have to do it. I got a responsibility before God to do that. But yes, we need to build a longer term relationship, not just the short term. Sometimes there's a cause that comes in and we all can galvanize. And if we can help, they can, send us an email. And if there's groups that we know in those particular states, we connect dots all the time. So there might be somebody we can connect them to. And if there's not anybody at the time, then we can let them know. We always got pastors there for sure. Because we got, a large, thousands of pastors across America. But as far as organizations, because at the end of the day, the Hispanics is the new kid on the block. Okay, it is a new kid on the block, but it's the fastest growing demographic. But it's wired more biblically and to really move in these principles. And so we just got to educate them. And that's why we need more people that are willing to do that. And we'll have for a better America.
Yeah, well, we got to reach across the lines. We got to communicate. White churches need to communicate, with Hispanic churches and black churches and stop being so separated.
Yes.
A couple weeks ago, I got to go with Andrew to Denver to the Colorado Multi-Ethnic Coalition meeting.
Yes, I heard about that.
Did you hear about it?
Yes, they called me. They actually asked me to come. Amazing. I said I couldn't make it.
It was so wonderful. There were blacks, Hispanics. There's a guy from Korea I met. There's all these different races and ethnicities that were present, but everybody loved the Lord. And everybody's responding to this message of we need to do something, we need to make a difference here. And I just want to throw that out because I totally believe in what you're saying. I think this is the way of the future.
Yes. And back to what Karen said earlier, because when we come, people say, well, you're trying to get everybody. I said, nope, I'm not trying to get everybody. We're trying to get the remnant. See, because every city, every neighborhood, every state has somebody in that city, state, and neighborhood that's crying out to God and saying, Father, how can I affect change? I'm done with this. What can I do? And then God starts connecting dots. That's where God will bring us in. Somebody, Andrew, Truth and Liberty. He starts connecting dots, Lance, all of it. He starts bringing us into all these people because there's a remnant that's crying out there. Yeah. What can I do? What needs to happen? And then next thing you know, we get a phone call or we just so happen to be there. I got a call literally from a pastor I hadn't heard in 10 years. Okay, we're friends, and we just hadn't had a chance to talk. And he says, I just moved. I didn't even know he'd moved to Colorado Springs of all places. Okay. And he goes, we need to get together, this, that, and the other. He goes, I'm now in Colorado Springs. This was last night. Okay, about 10 o'clock last night. Okay, so he goes, man, we crying out. We got to do something. So that's my point. There's people, God's moving from place to place, positioning them that are crying out, and God just, bam, connects the dot. I had a lady, we were doing a training in Houston. She's not even she was like 3 hours away. She goes, I was crying out to God. I want to make change because I'm tired of what's going on for my kids in schools and like sex ed and everything. And I look up and this ad, it wasn't even an ad, but somebody posted about the training that we were doing to engage the culture and take back our city and blah, blah, blah. She goes, so she drove 3 hours to be in the training. Now she's a coordinator. She's mobilized her church and she's mobilizing an army now. So these are the things that happen. There's a remnant everywhere. And that's what we're looking for because God has them earmarked already.
Yeah.
And that's where we're just going to move with God because he doesn't need everybody.
Amen.
He just needs somebody.
Amen.
And they're out there.
Yeah, amen. That's awesome.
That's awesome. Pastor Mark, you gave a statistic on the percentage of people in the Hispanic community that are entrepreneurs. What was that statistic?
75% of the new businesses in America are Hispanic-owned businesses.
Do you know, that is incredible. And when you look at what's happening with the Democratic Party, it is so just going towards socialism. So it just seems to me like socialism would go so against the grain of the way that God has created Hispanic people to be so entrepreneurial. So what are we doing? What are you doing? I'm sure you're doing something to communicate that threat of socialism against that entrepreneurial spirit.
Yes. Yeah, we're partnering with other groups as well. We just took a whole delegation of pastors and millennials to the Heritage Foundation, just to deal with the issue of socialism and to educate the kids. And then we were able to stick kids. They launched a new program called the Fuller Institute. So they allow kids to become interns and to be trained. And so we were able to have kids already in their program. We were the first group they showed this program to, so we already have kids in there. Then, for instance, I just come from Houston yesterday, by the way. Anyway, so we did a whole segment. We had a lady that's part of the network that has a civic ministry in their church doing the whole thing, but they're from Venezuela. Okay, so they came from there. All their kids, they're engineers, work for the government. They've completely assimilated, integrated into America and all these kind of things, right? So she began to show where Venezuela was. It had a bigger economy than China. It was more prosperous. It's got more resources, than even America and Israel and China all put together. All that's in Venezuela. He goes, but look at what's going on. Then she shows pictures of kids dying on the street. People are going hungry. You can't go to the store. All these things. So we're using every area of education to educate our folks, to let them know. Because they're already... They don't have that propensity because grandma and grandpa, if you're Hispanic, you don't get to play that game, okay? You're going to work, you're going to get a job, you're going to get an education. So this is why, this is how you grow up in a Hispanic community, in a Hispanic household, okay? It's the family thing. You respect, you honor. If you don't, they like to do that chancla deal. Okay, it's real, okay? All these things, but they're not, they don't have a socialist bent this way. And so as we, again, continue to educate them, there'll be that firewall, to not allow a socialistic movement to come into this nation. And I believe that'll be truly the case as we continue to make strides in doing that, all of us together.
Wow. That's encouraging. That's
really encouraging. So earlier in the program, Pastor Mark, you were talking about that is in schools and things, even to point to the sky. You were mentioning with somebody that was running in track and scriptures that people were being threatened. What effect does President Trump's recent executive order, I believe is what it is, you can correct me, Richard, if I'm wrong on that, that is reinstating or just stating that we have the right to pray in our schools. Will that help protect some of these things that you were talking about?
We got to go real fast here because we've only got a few seconds.
No, I think it's important because we've been believing and praying that the day was going to come. We're going to see prayer in school, Bible in school, and all these things. So definitely. But I think even greater was that now it allows the teachers to be able to do it too. And that was the greatest thing, even, that little caveat, this icing on the cake of allowing faculty and so forth to do it as well.
Just encouraging them to stand up for their faith, and they do have that constitutional right to do so.
Yes.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been a real pleasure. I've enjoyed it immensely. Can't wait to hear more from you as time goes on. But we've got to end this live cast tonight, and I'd like to thank all of our viewers for joining us. And, spread the word. Tell your friends and family about Truth and Liberty Livecast, Truth and Liberty Coalition. And be sure to join us next week on truthandliberty.net, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time for our next livecast. Thanks for joining us, and God bless you.
Join us next time for the Truth and Liberty broadcast. Find tonight's episode and related articles and links at truthandliberty.net. Truth and Liberty is viewer supported. If you'd like to help us continue our live casts, you can make a donation at truthandliberty.net